Syrian opposition groups gathered in Saudi Arabia today, the latest in another effort to unify President Bashar al-Assad's fragmented enemies. It comes as world powers continue to seek a solution to the Syrian war, with the fate of Assad remaining the major sticking point. I-24 News correspondent Ur Shapira has the details.
The political battle between supporters and opponents of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad continues, as does the fighting on the ground. Members of Syrian opposition groups gathered in Saudi Arabia Tuesday to choose a representative for future negotiations about the war-torn country. This perhaps is the most serious effort yet to unify Assad's rivals ahead of January 1st, the day set for the next round of the Syria talks in Vienna.
Most of the opposition that has formed in Egypt, Dubai and other countries, their committees are present here. There has been communication. The vision regarding the political solution about the transition process, a big proportion of them are in agreement. So we see that the way out is a document of consensus.
The first example to the ceasefire between Assad's forces and the opposition can be seen in the Al-Waher neighborhood in Homs. After 2 years of negotiations with Assad's forces, the rebels agreed to withdraw from the area.
The reconciliation is better. We hope the situation returns to the way it was and gets better.
But despite the progress on Syria, the gaps between the different countries fighting the Islamic State are still large. According to the Interfax news agency, a Russian submarine equipped with cruise missiles has approached the coast of Syria. Turkey, on the other hand, asked for the creation of safe zones in northern Syria.
Using a terrorist organization to fight against another terrorist organization would only bring more problems. The only solution is to provide a safe atmosphere for Syrian people so they can design their own future.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has called on an international gathering on December 18th in New York to push negotiations forward. But with so many factions involved and so many opinions, it is hard to see any real progress in the near future.
And with me here in the studio is Ali Waqid, I-24 News senior Middle East analyst. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me. What are the chances that something will come out of this so-called peace talks in Saudi Arabia?
I don't think there are much chances, Lucy. I think the Saudis felt urged to organize this conference because they knew that there were some understandings in Vienna where they were absent, or politically at least absent, and that there is an attempt of the Russian to try to reorganize the Syrian opposition. So the Saudis are trying via this conference to try to take sponsorship over parts of the Syrian opposition. We should pay attention to one very basic information, is that the main actors on the ground will not be present in the Riyadh conference. This is the Syrian regime, the Islamic State, the Al-Nusra Front, and of course the militias that are fighting to the side of President Assad. This is why maybe the people who will meet in Riyadh will reach some understandings, but the regime declared this evening that it will not be committed to the understandings. This is an attempt of the Saudis to try to put more tension in the Syrian relations.
You know, I'm trying again to understand, when the Saudis obviously don't want to see Bashar al-Assad anymore in his power, what are the chances that they will get to some kind of an understanding with Syria or with Iran that they don't agree with at all, or with the United States on continuing or the continuing of Bashar al-Assad's regime?
I don't think that it depends on the Saudis, Lucy, and we can judge but what is happening in Yemen, as we said yesterday, and what is happening in Lebanon. The Saudis were obliged to try to accept a president who is from the Hezbollah, Iran, and Syria camp, and also in Yemen they were obliged to impose over President Hadi a ceasefire in order to allow calm negotiations for peace. And if they had any advantage, they would not accept a ceasefire. And this is the case in Syria. The Saudis are rushed by the fact that the Russians are creating more and more facts on the grounds. And we are like 36 hours or 48 hours before the beginning, or 36 before the beginning of the Saudi conference in Riyadh. And we are seeing in the last hour, and we will see until the opening of this conference, the belligerents on the ground, the parties who are fighting on the ground, will try to improve their situation. And I'm meaning specifically the regime that is intensifying with the Russians and with Hezbollah its attacks over the factions that will be presented. Now, Lucy, we should not forget that some jihadist organizations affiliated to Al-Qaeda are participating in this conference.
So let's take this exactly what you said and talk with Abu Dandashi, Syrian journalist in Istanbul. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, good evening.
So, Mr. Dandashi, how it's going to work when some jihadist groups are taking part in the so-called peace negotiation, or so-called some kind of a peace agreement, or some kind of an understanding to get in Syria, when it's the worst to try to combine forces with the small devil in order to fight the big devil?
Well, you put it very well. How on earth, how can it possibly work when you only have 14 out of over 40 of the groups fighting in Syria who are actually going to attend? Now, what meeting is this? The 7th, the 8th, the 9th? I mean, as a Syrian, I have lost count of the conferences that have been put together for the purpose of coming up with a strange, weird formula whereby somehow Assad gets to stay. Now, I think by now it should have been obvious after all these conferences and failed attempts. That's not going to happen. There is nothing that can save this guy. If the regional powers had faced up to that fact from the very beginning, if Russia and Iran and the rest had faced up to that fact from the very beginning, all it would have taken was one conference to end the war in Syria. They could have a dozen more conferences, but as long as Assad gets to stay as part of the political process, they're not going to come to anything.
Mr. Dandashi, we're hearing some of the small groups, let's say some small minority groups, like the Kurds, are saying we're not participating in this. How come we are not taking part in these talks? And on the other side, we're starting to see some demands from minority groups to have some kind of an autonomy in Syria in the future. So on another side, we are watching, or we're seeing, that somebody is putting some hope in these so-called peace talks. But from what you're saying and from what Ali is saying, it seems that it's just talks in order to have some talks, and that's it.
Well, that's a huge mistake. To exclude the Kurds at this stage is a huge mistake, and you're just setting the seeds for future conflicts when you do that. The wishes and desires of the Kurds and other minority groups, maybe in the days of Hafez Assad, they could be ignored and overlooked, but that's definitely not the case anymore. When you ignore their wishes and desires now, you're just setting up the reasons for a future conflict. So that is a huge mistake on the part of the South, definitely.
Yes, Mr. Abu Dandashi, thank you very much. Small comment, Ali, about the Kurds?
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes of the Saudis is to try to ignore the Kurds, but it showed that there is a new equilibrium of power when the Kurds are mostly now supporting the Russian intervention. I do understand why the Saudis decided not to invite them.
Yes, Ali Waked, thank you very much for this.